Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. I'm Jacole Kitchen. I'm the Playhouse's Director of Arts Engagement and In-House Casting. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for Coffee with the Playhouse. I am standing in for Gabe Green, not the face you were expecting to see this morning, but I'm so happy to be here. We are all starting to gather virtually. And as we do, let's have a little bit of fun with Playhouse trivia as per usual. You can email your responses to marketing@ljp.org to be entered into a drawing for a Starbucks gift card. Okay, this morning's trivia. The 2012 musical Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots was based on a concept album by what famous rock band? Great question. Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, concept album by what famous rock band? All right. Email your responses to marketing@ljp.org to be entered into that drawing. And now, without further ado, please welcome our illustrious Coffee with the Playhouse host and the one and only Rich Family Artistic Director of La Jolla Playhouse, Christopher Ashley.
That was such an exciting intro, Jacole. Thank you for that. I feel like there was drama to it. It's really good to see you, Jacole, and it's great to see you all. I am speaking to you from the a hotel room in New York City, where I am currently bubbled and quarantined as we shoot the film of Come From Away. We have one more shooting day left, and it will be released in the fall by Apple TV. So look for that in the fall, and we're having a really amazing time shooting it. But in the meantime, we have two extraordinary guests today. We have the Tony Award-winning costume designer extraordinaire, Paul Tazewell, and the Playhouse costume shop supervisor, Jennifer Abels. So Paul has designed more than a dozen productions at La Jolla Playhouse, including Fly, most recently, Escape to Margaritaville, and Summer, and Memphis. The very beloved Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots. He and I worked together on a production called His Girl Friday. He designed The Wiz in many productions. He's, I would say, of all the designers who work at the Playhouse, most frequently asked by staff is, when he's not working with us, when is Paul coming back? So we are delighted to have him here with us today. You will also know him from his Tony Award-winning design for Hamilton, as well as his 5 other Tony nominations for Broadway productions like Ain't Too Proud, The Life and Times of the Temptations, In the Heights, and Memphis. He's worked in film, including the upcoming West Side Story film directed by Steven Spielberg. So he is multi-talented. We also have joining us today, Jen Abels, who has been the La Jolla Playhouse costume shop supervisor since 2018. Prior to that, she spent 10 years at Dallas Theater Center as the costume director. She's been a freelance designer, hair and wig makeup artist, for several years, design credits on her own with Alabama Shakespeare Festival and the Oklahoma Shakespeare Festival and the Kitchen Dog Theater. She's an MFA in costume design from Florida State University. So let's bring them on screen. Welcome to both Paul and Jen.
Hi, Chris.
Hey, it's good to see you. So maybe you could start us off with Paul. Why don't you, if you could start by just talking about how did you get your start? What led you to this career?
Way back when I was in high school, or just a number of years before that, even, I was bitten by the bug of theater with a production of West Side Story that I was in. Actually, I was being a performer, and that was the germ of a passion that I nurtured along with. Because I come from a family of artists and crafters, makers. My mom is an amazing artist, and so was her mother. That was always a part of my life, a part of the way that I express myself creatively. So a blend of the two created a costume designer. My desire to perform kind of waned once I got into college, and I focused on being, majoring in costume design at North Carolina School of the Arts in Winston-Salem, and then also got my graduate degree at New York University, Tisch School of the Arts in New York. And once I graduated, I started working professionally. I was fortunate enough to start designing probably the year after I graduated because of my good friend and collaborator, Tazewell Thompson. He was the associate artistic director, with Zelda Fitchhandler at the Arena Stage, and that was really the birth of my professional career.
I too started in acting and was not ever very good at it, but I feel like that's a portal many people take into theater, is through acting bug. Jen, how did you get started?
Same. I was born in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and my mother was determined that her children would be cultured. So she exposed us to the arts as often as possible. And she put me in dance lessons when I was 3 years old. I was a total ham. I loved being on stage. I was in my first play when I was 6. And I really genuinely never wanted to do anything else besides work in the theater. And I didn't know that costuming was a job, but at the same time, I always wanted to be on stage. I was completely obsessed with Barbies. And I had a great aunt who worked at a garment factory and had scraps. And I would say, like, I want my Barbie to have an ice skating costume, and I want Ken to have a matching this, or I want my Barbie to have embroidered pajamas and Ken to have a matching robe. And she made all of it for me, bless her. And then when I got to college, which, like Paul, I became self-aware enough about acting that made me not really good at it anymore. And at the same time, the costume professor sort of took me under her wing and taught me all about technology and design and kind of got me going in that direction. So I did some summer stock things and then eventually went to Florida State to get MFA in design.
I love that you just mentioned somebody who sort of helped guide you into it. I feel like one of the things of so many people this year have been talking about mentorship and who helps lift other people up and guide them and pass on what they know and support. Sounds like you had, Jen, a mentor of some sort, or someone who helped.
Yeah, her name is Donna Meester. She teaches at University of Alabama right now, head of their costume program. And really, like, I took a costume design class that was required, and she asked me to stay after class and come to her office. And of course, I was like, oh no, what did I do? Like, so afraid. And she just said, like, I think you have a knack for this. I think you can do this as a career. And all the excuses, like, I don't know. So I don't know this, I don't know that. And she just looked me square in the eye and said, Jennifer, I've never taught anyone who wanted to learn and couldn't. And I mean, what do you say to that? Nothing. She absolutely got me started, helped me get my first job at Colorado Shakespeare Festival, where I was probably the worst stitcher in their costume shop. But I had a magical summer and learned so much. And then when I chose Florida State for graduate school because I had been working in shops, learning a lot about the technology side of things, like draping, craftworks, building things. And I really liked that. And I was better at that than I was at design. And Florida State, their program is like 50-50. You learn about design, you learn about technology. And so I felt like that was the right place for me. 2 professors there, Colleen Misha and Martha Cooper, wore me out for 3 years, but I have been having fun and making a living ever since.
I love that. Hey, Billy Patrick just said hello to me in the chat, and I'm saying hi back. So you, at the shutdown, right before a little over a year ago, you were both working on Fly together with a really extraordinary set of costumes. Can you talk a little bit about how that show, the process on that show? I love that picture. There's a video somewhere of testing the motion on the alligator costume. about what the process for putting that show together was?
Yeah, it was, it was a lot of fun. It was amazing to work with Jen on that as well. It was directed by Jeffrey Seller, who actually is the producer of Hamilton, which we met when I did the design for In the Heights, and it was such a challenge because we've got all of these characters that are human and also, something else. We've got the crocodile. There's a chorus of trees. And then there were also representative or metaphors for other emotional figures in Wendy's, kind of life and in her head, and how all of this world and creating this world, how it all needed to connect together was really exciting to be a part of and put together. But that video that you showed, I mean, there were technical challenges. One of the biggest ones, I mean, there's a direct photograph of the armature of the crocodile. It needed to go on and off fairly easily. It also, I wanted to make sure that it had movement that was suggestive of an actual crocodile body, and a crocodile body moving through space. And that, a lot of focus on the tail and how that would move across the stage. But then the Mama Wata was the kind of the parallel half of who that character was, which is this, kind of Mother Earth figure for the Wendy character. So, blending those two was really, quite exciting. And then having someone like Jen, who, would jump right on board with, figuring out how to create that. How to manage, the other talented builders in her shop, in developing how we would approach a number of different characters. I think that was the maybe the wing or the breastplate actually for Tink, who was kind of she's a fairy, but we have images that reference dragonfly wings and as you see here. Overall, we've got a lot of different characters in the production that needed to fly. And so they were all harnessed up, and some of them wore their harnesses on the outside of their costumes, and some of them actually wore their costumes underneath. And so we built them so that you couldn't actually see the harness. So it was a huge challenge for all of us, definitely.
I have to brag on our production folks and everyone in the costume shop for a minute. I think as a director, one of the amazing things at working at the Playhouse is whatever the idea is, the first response from the shop is always, let's try it. And the excitement of a new challenge. It's an amazing group of people. Can you talk a little bit, Jen? I'm not sure people know really how, what the jobs and how specific those skill sets are that give rise to a design like Fly. Can you talk a little bit about who does what on a show like that?
Yeah, sure. I'm sort of like the first person to get the information. Like Paul sends me sketches, ideas, research. We sort of work. That's like a good working drawing. That's what we call that. We work on the budget, kind of get all of that squared away. And then there's a resident design assistant named Desiree Hatfield Buckley, who is the most amazing shopper, costume getter, and costume returner on the planet. And she scours the internet and all of the San Diego and sometimes Los Angeles area to see what we can purchase. And then depending on what the needs are, some things, Fly it's a fantasy story. And so there were a lot of things very specific that you can't buy out in the world that needed to be built. So those things, I then talked to my draper, Alex Zeke. He can take a drawing and figure out how to build it, make the pattern from scratch. And then he passes it off to firsthand, in this case, Rebecca Fabrez, who will take that pattern, cut it out, put together a mock-up, and then we have some great stitchers like Kira McGee and Stephanie Gift who sew everything. So like it all kind of goes through like that. Then we have a craft department. For Fly, it was our sort of resident craftsperson, Tess Maitraw, right there with the purple hair. And then Junior Bergman, who was in the previous picture working on Tink. And they figure out how to make sort of everything that's not clothes. They dye fabric. And Fly was, I mean, that was a juicy project for them. It doesn't really get much better than that.
You can see in a bunch of those pictures too, there's like there's both the sketches that everybody is trying to carry out. There's also a lot of times there's kind of photographs around, inspiration photographs.
Right.
I love about working with you, Paul, is like the first processes of design. There's this world of visual imagery you bring to the table, and like sort of here's the feeling of the production, and then you can kind of already immediately be going, I love that, and I love that, and start to put ideas together even from the first conversation.
Definitely. I mean, that is a big part of, always a big part of my design process is to collect a lot of imagery that seems to speak to what the world is or could potentially be of a production, and then to have conversations with you, the director, whomever the director is, to have you kind of edit what those ideas are, choose what seems to be appropriate to the way that you want to tell the story, and then throw away what doesn't really work. But it gives me an entry into your brain and how you are imagining this world manifesting itself. And then I go away, I take all those images, I go away and I start to do sketches and creating more specifically what the costumes will look like. But I still refer back to what it was that we were excited about, what those original ideas were that we were excited about, because I don't want to lose track of the qualities that we saw in those images. So it then potentially becomes a blend of both in arriving at what the final look will be.
Yeah, and one of the things I enjoy about our process is, so we get to that first design meeting and there's all of this imagery, and that you could do 55 different productions from what you bring to the table. We kind of hone it in and start working with that. And then we're kind of on the same page. The other designers are working, and how is the set design? We're working with those ideas and the lighting and the music. And then enter the actors, and they all almost always have this very kind of emotional and deeply rooted in like, who am I and how am I expressed by what I'm going to wear? So they kind of blow it all open, and you have to kind of reform with how they're going to act this part and how they live in a really vital way within this overall scheme that we've been working with. I love that process of like, you find it and then you have to break it and refine it because the actors are bringing all of these new ideas in.
Absolutely. And that, that's the, for me as the designer, I sit in the middle of that. And that's what's so exciting and gratifying in doing what I do, is I have the opportunity to collaborate with so many different people at many different levels. Speaking of the actor, that's a live being that that I, as a designer, have to incorporate into the idea. And with you, the director, and myself, figure out, okay, well, so as a live character, how do the ideas that we've arrived at kind of fit onto this person, literally and figuratively? And then also, in turn, working with, someone like Jen to develop how we're going to really recreate all these looks. What do we need? What products do we need? What kind of manpower do we need in order to make these ideas happen? It's a swirl of people that that it takes to make up a show or make up costumes for a show.
It also, actors, that fitting process is so personal to an actor, and I feel like the two of you together, like if an actor goes off to a fitting in the middle of a rehearsal day, they come back rejuvenated, which is not always true in every process. Sometimes they come back shell-shocked and wounded, and you have to put them back together. But I feel like when the two of you have had a fitting with an actor, they sort of come back with like more center and more more sense of purpose about, I think I know what I'm doing. I think I know a couple extra tools to work with. And then you can feel them in the next day of rehearsal start to, that suddenly the clothes are part of who they are. And start, there's like the conversation between the clothes and the staging starts to get more vital.
That's
what was
great.
that from? That last picture?
That was Jesus Christ Superstar Live for
Oh,
NBC. Yeah, that's Brandon Victor Dixon. Absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, what's important and what I really appreciate about working with Jen is that we're both listeners, and I think it's so very important to be able to stand in a fitting and realize, you know, if a costume fitting is going south, let's say, you know, if there are ideas that are really not gelling, you know, to just stop and say, oh, okay, I can see on this actor's face that this isn't working for them. How can I pull out of them what's going on? How can I listen to what they're saying, the words that they're using, to make sense of what this idea is and what needs to change? You know, how it can you know, become a better idea, actually, because then it becomes part of the actor that's actually playing the role.
Yeah, it's therapy, right? I mean, it's like making sure that people feel like it's a safe space to
Right.
you know,
Absolutely.
talk about their hopes and fears.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like actually was thinking like a costume fitting for me is a bit of a sacred space. It's a confidential.
Yeah.
And when you think about actors, somebody tells them what time to come to work, when they can take a break, what they say, where they stand, what they wear. They have very little control over things that everyone else takes for granted. And that they have to stay in a very vulnerable place and trust a lot of people in order to be able to do their job well. And I don't, that's not something to be taken lightly. And I feel like Paul and I both into that with great care. And then it contributes to the overall success of the entire product. That's what we're all trying to do.
I love that. Jen, can you talk a little bit about the dance that you do on every show about what's going to get built, what's going to get pulled from our very extensive costume collection, what's going to get purchased either kind of contemporary clothes or from, you know, a vintage store? Like, can you talk about like that? All three of those end up on stage in most shows, between built and pulled and bought.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the first things that we do is go to our costume storage and pull anything we have that might work. Yeah, that's what we call our show closet, put together in the upper lobby. Because anything that you can pull from storage, get from a thrift store, secondhand shop, first of all, those things look more lived in, more like real people's clothes. And it's free. It saves us money. It's free, or it's very inexpensive, which frees up resources for where we really need to put them. For Diana, Desiree and Junior and I went to Los Angeles for a day and bought 18 50-gallon black trash bags full of vintage clothes.
Wow.
As so much of that obviously happened in the early 1980s to like the mid 90s. And like, we don't have to, it's there. It's in the world already more authentically than we could produce it. And there's great vintage shopping in Los Angeles. So the bulk of that, the ensemble and sort of the like secondary characters you pulled, and then what you don't have in a show like that, then you build. Of course, that requires a lot of alterations, which our shop does as well, which takes a lot of skill. So that's that was more of a situation where it's like Diana's clothes are very specific. All of those. The rest of this we can find, and then we'll fill in the hole by building what we can't find. Whereas something like Fly, right out of the gate, it's fantasy costumes, they're very specialty. Anytime somebody's flying clothes, generally it takes a lot of alterations or just go ahead and build it. So it depends on the project, but we sort of start with what can we purchase and then kind of narrow it down to what we build.
I love Paula. Memphis had such a multi-year arc from, starting at the Playhouse, working its way up through Seattle to Broadway, on through to London and tours. And it's interesting how many of the kind of like the first kind of pieces from the La Jolla Playhouse, like those, especially the ones that were sort of vintage, like they didn't last. Like they're not going to last for years and years and years, but the inspiration of some of those original early costumes,
right,
and like sort of got worked into your conception of the show. And we started building, things based on that first production.
Right.
Keeps on growing and getting, more and more itself.
Right. Well. I mean, I think that it was, that was what was so, I felt very fortunate being able to, take those steps, because the idea becomes refined as you move through that process. I mean, I found that in other productions, let's say for Hamilton, we did a similar thing where we had a number of different stops. There was a workshop, and then there was a production at the Public, and then there was the Broadway production. And for each of them, the design, the literal design was different. The intention was the same, but it really refined what we were, going after. And I think that it just, at the end of the day, it just, it can help but benefit the production overall. I was remembering, Memphis at La Jolla Playhouse, and just, we were pulling costumes from stock, and trying to use as much as we could that seemed appropriate. But then there was a lot of dancing. So we were building, trying to build clothes that would match or live well with the clothes that we were pulling from stock. And that becomes a little bit of a balance. I mean, you're designing towards something that already exists, and then try and keep the character as specific as possible. So that it becomes more of a challenge than if you're able to just draw and design everything from scratch, which is where we ended up on Broadway. The benefit is that the clothes hold up. I mean, because they're brand new, they will last longer. But also, as a designer, and towards the design, I'm able to really control what that palette is, and how it's specific to the different characters as well.
Yeah, I would definitely say, like, I feel like there's some kind of a continuum in design aesthetic, where there's some designers who go for a much more every costume is its own world, and there's a kind of a little of this and a little of that on stage. And I think the other end of the spectrum is very like a really intentional color palette, really, the silhouettes are all very much worked together. And I think you have an interesting impulse for both. I mean, I feel like it's very character driven, but you have a real eye on overall stage picture and overall kind of production conception.
Right.
Which feels, do you have thoughts about that?
I think that it's always, it is reflective of what the piece is, and also the director that I'm working with. I think that, working with you, you're a director that is very intent on character, kind of character specificity, and that's a great joy for me. All those details that kind of support who a character is being present. There are some productions where you can do bold strokes, and you're really creating a world that is more of a meta world. It's kind of a little more broad, but I found with the work that we've done together that it's always, at the end of the day, it's about the layers of personality that make a character, and how can I, as a designer, as a costume designer, and in the choice of clothes that I put on those characters, how can I support that as storytelling?
I love that. We have a couple questions in the In the chat, Jen Boaz is asking, when a show goes from LJP to Broadway, do the costumes go too? Which they almost always, at least some of them do.
Some part of them do, yeah. I mean, that's what I've experienced. Yeah, definitely.
Would you agree with that, Jen? That in your experience, a lot of these the shows, that at least the basic core of the costumes often continues on.
Yeah, we generally we send the whole thing. And what I've seen in the past is some things are kept, some things are sent to shops and copied, like some vintage pieces, like let's make this, Broadway level sturdy. Sometimes things are used for rehearsal costumes, or sometimes even like publicity, like early publicity shoots. The clothes can be useful for that as well. I don't need it. We don't have anywhere to put it. I'm happy to send it on.
I'm amused when something that the La Jolla Playhouse shop will make, I'm thinking about, there's a bowl of fish and cheese and Come From Away, and that bowl of fish and cheese has become totally iconic. So through the years, many different other props people have remade that bowl of fish and cheese with a little picture from La Jolla Playhouse of what that fish and cheese looks like. Because right now, that's the fish and cheese for the production. And if you're going to make a new one, it has to, remain inspired by that original fish and cheesiness.
We all make our mark on the world somehow.
It's true, in many different ways. Stephanie Gift is asking, can you talk about the Lost Boys and the Pirates and how the renderings came to life?
Oh, wow. That was through, a lot of conversations with Jeffrey and trying to figure out how he was imagining the Lost Boys. We did a lot. Jeffrey had collected some imagery, some that were young men in Africa, in nature, and so there are tribal images. I pulled in images of boys from all different cultures and all over the world, just trying to create a pastiche or a collage of ideas around who these Lost Boys might be and keeping them as diverse as possible. And then I went about kind of drawing and collecting, different ideas into one character and making them specific to who the character was as it was written. But then, that row of costumes that you saw, that long rack of costumes that you saw on that balcony, that was that was our stock of clothes that I pulled from in order to then develop what those boys would be wearing. So a lot of that stuff was, it was found from Goodwills and other thrift stores, and because they were all clothes that were supposed to be left over, that were cast off or hand-me-down. And then I was able to, with Jen and fitting, put together these looks, and then we distressed and built things to go on top of them, and really create looks that were very very individualized, which was really great.
I love that. Chris Kerr asks, when you design danceable period costumes, do you use stretch fabrics? Do you design looser versions? I want to know the story behind her. Is she making some danceable clothes right now?
Absolutely. I mean, Jen can talk about this as well, but in this day and age, there's so much fabric that has some kind of elastic element to it. So we make use of that, all the time in building costumes for dancers, definitely.
Yeah, during Fly, the Tree Women, those costumes were printed by Dynamics in New York City, and so I ordered swatches of stretch, probably like 10 or 15 different swatches. And we played with it and pulled on it because, stretch is one way or two-way or four-way, until we picked what we thought was the right one. And then it was develop the pattern, which are like the brown paper thing you see there, which was developed by Alex and then marked up by Kyle Everett, who's working on this with us in the shop. So Mio, who was doing the developing the computer design, Paul's guidance, could sort of place where all of that shading and stuff went. And then we made files, and then so I scanned the patterns here at the FedEx Kinkos by the Whole Foods next to the Playhouse, and would send those patterns to Mio, who would make that kind of markup and let Paul give feedback on how that looked. And then those files went to Dynamic. I bought the fabric, had it shipped to them. They sent it from New York to California to be coated with a special coating, back to New York, then through the printer back to the Playhouse, and we cut them out and stitched them together for a simple unitard to look like a tree.
It takes a village to make a tree unitard.
Yeah. It really does. It really does. And with those, we actually made 3 per dancer for wear and tear and 2 show days.
Yeah.
Wow. You never think about like just how much wear and tear those dance costumes take in an 8-show week. It's crazy.
Absolutely.
Can we talk about the Yoshimi costumes? I think about those robot costumes, and those are some of the most indelible and technically sophisticated. The way that they played in the show and how they interacted with lighting. Can you talk about the development of those a little bit, Paul?
Certainly. That was and really, one of my all-time joys, it is working with the La Jolla shop, because I know that they, faced with a challenge like those dancing robots, they'll dig right in. I mean, say absolutely, bring it on. And as you were saying, it took a lot of R&D to get to where we did on those costumes. That production was directed by Des McAnuff, and part of the story and the ask was that the robots could go from being pink to being white, which was written into the music, into the story that we were telling. So somewhere along the way, the idea came to me that one way of doing that was to do it with lighting, and I thought that it would be really magical to do it with lighting from within. We also, were collaborating with Basil Twist, who was building the huge, oversized robot as well. So all of us were working together, connected together in figuring out how to create these shapes. What ended up being these cast or vacuum formed shells that were plastic, and figuring out what is that product that will shine like a globe from within. What kind of what we ended up using an LED tape that was all wired to a motherboard that each dancer wore on their bodies, and it was all operated. It was through radio control. I mean, it was it was all automatically operated from the side, and because it all had to happen on cue. It was all set to music, so it all had to happen on cue. And it took, there were days where, you'd have one robot that would come out with one blue arm, and then the rest of them was pink. It was just the way that, it was a huge lesson in understanding light and understanding LED light and how those forms of light come together and actually work. But, in the end, it was hugely gratifying and a really moving piece. I mean, the other part of this was, which Des is known for, is, having quick changes and his transitions, going from one moment to the next, going from one scene to the next. Well, we had 2 different versions of a robot. There was one robot that was that kind of, where you see those pink globes all over their body. The other one was, it was light tape that actually moved, that was placed all over a similar silhouette. But there was one time where they had to get out of the globe version. These are all of the dancers. It's probably an ensemble of 12 maybe, that all went from being, the pink robot to being these other kinds of robots where the light was chasing and it did all kinds of things. And again, it was remotely controlled.
I also love that, like, the as she's trying to fight them, they can actually the lighting was so controlled that they could, like, she's fighting a robot and it disappears and she's like, where'd it go? And it's behind her.
Yeah.
Like that sort of sense of, like, they can come and go kind of magically. And there's a bit of video from our production. Maybe you could roll the Yoshimi video. Amazing.
Oh, it's been a while since I've seen that. So
yeah, it's kind of thrilling. Why don't we throw open to some audience questions? Jacole, do you want to join us out on screen? Hello, welcome back.
Hello, thank you so much. Yeah, Chris, I think you covered a lot of the questions, but there's a few others that came in. Kay Gerton asked, during live productions, when there's a costume malfunction, is there a costume tech on site? Who addresses that? Especially in shows like Diana and Donna, when there were so many costume changes. How do you prepare for those kind of changes to happen during a live performance?
We have what we call the wardrobe crew, who is backstage, setting up, helping with all of the quick changes, and cleaning up the aftermath every night after the show. And I always make sure that, like, people who run wardrobe, that is a very particular skill. Most people who run wardrobe also can stitch or have experience in the craft shop, and can do basic repairs. So they would pick up something, if anything were to go wrong, they would fix it.
Paul, thoughts about that?
No, I mean, well, both the crew of a shop and also the wardrobe crew, I rely on them heavily, so very heavily, and really appreciate everything they bring to the the process of maintaining well, maintaining the costumes well, because once I design a production and we go through all of the fitting process and tech, and once the show opens, I leave town, and it's really on the wardrobe crew to maintain the look of everything and really respect what the design is and make sure that it stays as hopefully as beautiful as it was when it first opened. So I'm reliant on them and their abilities, definitely.
I'm always amazed by the capacity for an actor and a dresser together to learn each other's movements, so that what in tech seems like an impossibly short a period of time to actually accomplish something, when you go back 2 months later, they know exactly what they're doing. They have, almost time for a cigarette, before they walk back on stage. Like that what two people can get so perfect in the dance of a costume change if you give them time and it's organized right and the costume is well built and everybody can stay calm and focused, and they always do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, more choreography.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's choreography, just figuring that out.
We had an early question in the chat from Faith Steenbergen, just wondering what you've been doing during the past year of the pandemic to keep your creativity flowing, with theater being shut down and official costume making being on hold. How have you been spending your time?
Well, I mean, for me, Fly was the last new production that I've actually been a part of. When we went into the shutdown, I went from opening Fly to LA, where there was a production of Hamilton happening, and that was when everything was shut down. I spent time with my mother. I was able to spend time for 3 months in North Carolina. I did some of my own, kind of personal search and exploring being creative in other ways. And then I walked into just finished maybe a month ago a new production of Hamilton that's in Australia, in Sydney, and so that was a delight to be able to be in Sydney for a little bit and share Hamilton with that community as well.
That's wonderful.
And you also made a movie.
And I made a movie. Well, I made a movie. There was a movie that I was working on. During the shutdown, there was a movie that I was working on that I was probably 3/4 into designing it, and that kind of shifted over to the side because they couldn't get themselves together around how to deal with the pandemic. But before that, yes, I'd made 2 movies, both Harriet and West Side Story.
I love that. That is an amazing picture.
Yeah. Sorry.
Ariana from Summer.
In Summer, yeah.
Playing Anita. Love that.
And before that,
Jen,
Hamilton. But yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Jen, you're anything about you want to share about your year?
I realized that I sort of replaced my desk and my office with the kitchen. I became like super fixated on having everything just so in the kitchen at the start and end of every day. And then I got on YouTube and taught myself how to make Korean food. And then it was about to be my birthday. I like birthday cake. So I was like, I guess I need to learn how to bake. So I taught myself how to bake.
I love that.
Yeah. We make masks too. Like mask making took up the first couple of months when there was a shortage. I
don't know that people know this. The costume shop went into production creating masks when there was that kind of early in the year when there was a real shortage, and made some beautiful masks, which I still wear with great pleasure.
Yeah, we were able
to wear my Playhouse mask too.
Back to work, and I think we made almost 4,000 masks in 7 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
I love that.
And Chris, you and Paul were just talking about making films. There is a question from Andrea Kent. Is there anything that you can mention on this platform about the Come From Away film?
Not that much, but we have one more shooting day. We're shooting it in the Schoenfeld Theater. We shot day 1 with 10 cameras. So
wow.
It's tomorrow we're going to have an audience, socially distanced and masked, but in our theater. So I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, it's so exciting. So one of the things, this isn't a question from the audience, this is a question from me, because one of the things that I love the most about theater and theater magic is the quick change. And can you talk a little bit about just what that is to just sort of design for a quick change, and Jen, what that is to assemble for a quick change? And then Chris, I would love to hear from you and Paul if that has shifted at all with filming it. Is there anything about the quick change that the costume, do you still need a quick change? Do you still get some of that theater magic when you're filming a piece of theater? I'm just always so fascinated by a good quick change.
Quick changes are, normally with musicals, that's one of the qualities of theater magic that we tend to be asked to produce. It can manifest in many different ways. It can happen in different ways. Sometimes a costume that will appear later will be dressed underneath a costume that's on top, and the top costume breaks away and it reveals the costume underneath. Chris and I, when we did Margaritaville, there were the zombies that then became these sparkly tourists on the island, and figuring that out, how were we going to strip away a mask and a hat and a wig and clothing that was completely distressed and falling off their bodies like zombies, and then reveal these sparkly kind of Radio City costumes. And there was a lot of engineering that went into it, figuring out how a piece of clothing will fall off of a body. Where does the clothing need to break? So that you have to really understand geometry and the clothing and how the clothing is put together in order to then figure out how it's going to come off the body.
Yeah, I would say that was an amazing process to put that together. In theater, because you're watching it real time as an audience member, someone walks off stage, does a immense change and walks back on in a couple of seconds is super impressive and makes you gasp. On film, because as long as there's a cut in there, that you could have filmed it at totally different times. Like what's impressive about that is harder to hold on to. So I tended on the couple of films we've shot this year that came from a play and it's becoming a film. Like if it's a vista, if it's on screen and you can just let it play through, so all of that magic is happening in front of you, that's still impressive on film. And then also I think in some ways, if you just don't cut away from it, like there's a scene in Diana where she's wearing a kind of frumpy costume. She walks behind a costume rack and she comes back out and she's wearing like her first super fashionable kind of Paris fashion. And as long as the shot doesn't interrupt itself, you sort of can still get some of that feeling from the theater of like, how did they do that? And the how did they do that is such a great feature of theater.
And Jen, how do you construct to get that how did they do that factor?
It's completely dependent on all of the circumstances. And what I find the most reliable source of information on that quick change is the actor that's doing it. So nobody knows what an actor's doing better than the actor themselves. So in fittings, when we know that we're going to be facing like a really tricky quick change, I tend to ask for like 15 minutes extra time maybe and say like, okay, where do you leave? Where do you enter? What do you think your travel time is? How do you think this is going to work? What do you need from this? And then we sort of will start to kind of like build the idea. We might have an idea going in, but that information from the actor will let us like adjust it to be the most successful. That's generally where I start. And then, do we put snaps here, Velcro here, zippers there, elastic in the shoelaces? Like there's all kinds of tricks. So there's some things in Diana that we called jumpsuiting, where we took like a skirt, a blouse, a sweater, and sewed the whole thing together. And you just put like a zipper in the back, the sweater goes over. We did that in some menswear too, where it was khaki pants, leather belt, dress shirt, tie, all sewn together with a big old plastic zipper up the back. So you just step in, put it on, zip, put the jacket on.
I feel
like extreme quick change.
Yeah, I feel like once upon a time, Velcro was more of a thing, but I think people, like audiences, got onto that like sound. So I think magnets are like way more, I feel like, in the current vocabulary than Velcro.
Yeah, there's a scene in the movie Garden State where this guy is living in a huge mansion and he got rich from inventing silent Velcro. And every time I see it, I'm like, if only that were real.
We have time for one more question, Jacole?
Yeah, we have one more question in the chat. This is from Love Laugh 315. Which shows gave you the longest and shortest amounts of time to prepare from design to showtime? And which ones were you most happy about or worked out the best?
The least amount of time. Just trying to think what was the I would say, Dr. Zhivago that I did on Broadway, that was for the size of the production, that was a really truncated period of time. And it was a lot of corralling period clothing, that was, turn of the century, teens, because it passed through so many different periods, that the process was a bit daunting to achieve that. But I was also very happy with the look overall. Once we got to the other side, it was a lot of stress getting there, but the look in the end was really quite wonderful. Other production, a production like His Girl Friday was just really satisfying because it was, because it was a play, it was containable. I could design, this stylish main character. The menswear was really great. It's a great period. It was a fantastic cast, so that was gratifying for me, just to be able to relax into it and know that all the pieces were going to be there, and it wasn't going to be a huge struggle to pull all the pieces together. It was just everyone, giving their, A game and delivering good work. That was really great, kind of great.
I totally agree. I want to nominate for myself. It wasn't really a design process, but in New York, they sometimes do these kind of 24-hour plays where the play is, there's 24 hours from the time the play starts being written to the time it's in front of an audience. And I did one year with a play by David Lindsay-Abaire, and he wrote it. It was all took place poolside. It was in the middle of winter. No one was wearing or had swimsuits and all that stuff. So we read it that morning. We had 2 hours before rehearsal started, and then we had an audience 2 hours later. So everybody ran home, got their swimwear, came back to rehearsal. So it was that was self-design in a 2 hour period. So that was the quickest I've ever had to work.
That's great.
What about for you, Jen? Do you have a smallest window and most satisfying?
There was a show I was working on where I had sort of collage design boards, so it had an idea, and then I went to the first read on the first day of rehearsal, and the designer, I noticed it over, and he was sketching on a piece of paper while they were reading, and then he would be like, "This is her costume. This is her costume. This is that costume." And I was like, "That's great!" And I just took a picture of it and texted it to the draper. And by the time we got out of the read-through, there were things draped on the form to start talking about the clothes.
I love that.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm just there to facilitate someone else's process, so it's good. We roll with it.
And so very necessary, definitely.
Absolutely. And it was an amazing team behind you, Jen. So I want to thank Paul and Jen for an extraordinary conversation and the great work you both do together and at the Playhouse. So thank you for joining us today. It was really extraordinary to have you here with us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Very fun. It's nice to see you all too.
Yeah, definitely. Missing you guys.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you all to the audience and for all your wonderful questions. And if you missed any part of this broadcast, if you want to see it again or share it with a friend, you can always find this on La Jolla Playhouse's YouTube channel, and you can subscribe so you don't ever miss a thing.
I want to say that we are still at the Playhouse going strong with our digital programming. Last week, we premiered Toward Belonging, a powerful new dance piece with spoken word poetry by former Playhouse company manager, Anjanette Mariah Ramey, who you might also remember. We had her in the March Coffee with the Playhouse segment, and it's now on our website. So please check it out, along with several other free digital wow works. And we're also just a couple of weeks away from launching our 2021 pop tour, Pick Me Last. This is an annual play for young audiences that this year will be available free virtually this month. Also directed by Nicole Kitchen, who was just with us on screen, and written by the extraordinary Idris Goodwin. So I want to thank you all for joining us and your continued support of the Playhouse. It means the world to us. And we look forward to seeing you at the next Coffee with the Playhouse in June. And as we leave, we will roll a little bit of Sideshow, a show designed by Paul Tazewell.
I want to be like everyone else, but not like my sister says. She wants stability, she would like fame. I'd like serenity, frenzied acclaim. Though we can't agree on a single response, we want what everyone wants. Only what everyone wants. The same as everyone.